Very happy to introduce another very important part of the GoMRI community, and that's Dr. Rick Shaw. Rick and I have been friends for many years. We worked together at LSU, and Rick was a great addition to the GoMRI Research Board. His background is in larval fish, and he retired as the Associate Dean of the School of the Coastal Environment at LSU. Rick?
Thank you, Chuck. I'm trying to get myself PO'd on here.
Hear you loud and clear. Proceed.
Great. First, let me welcome you once again to this GoMRI and Sea Grant sponsored Zoom event from Louisiana, which sits here at the gateway to the Gulf of Mexico, America's forgotten sea. I say gateway because Louisiana sits at the mouth of America's largest river, the fourth longest river in the world, connecting 31 states and 2 Canadian provinces, and draining 41% of the continental US and supporting America's largest delta. It also supports the ports of South Louisiana, the largest tonnage port in the Northern Hemisphere, the Port of New Orleans and Plaquemines Port, which ranked number 1, number 4, and number 11 in the USA, and will only grow in importance with the widening of the Panama Canal. But being the gateway to America's breadbasket has a price to pay for Louisiana. That is the largest recurring hypoxic zone in the United States, the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, resulting from agriculture's nutrient loading of the river. Besides supporting US agriculture, Louisiana supports US offshore oil and gas exploration, has the nation's only offshore oil port, Loop, and has one of the nation's largest liquefied natural gas plants and ports in America. Louisiana also has 60% of America's coastal wetlands, yet experiences 80% of America's coastal land loss. We are the proverbial canary in the coal mine early warning system for the rest of the US with respect to global climatic change because of our significant vulnerabilities to sea level rise and the projected increases in the frequency and severity of adverse weather events like heavy rain-induced flooding, hurricanes, storm surge. To help address some of these coastal vulnerabilities, Louisiana has developed extensive coastal restoration plans that will be conducting some of the largest ecosystem level manipulations involving extensive sediment and freshwater diversions. Yes, Louisiana has great natural resources and great challenges, making it a great natural laboratory for coastal and oceanographic research and coastal resiliency. So why do I say Louisiana is part of America's forgotten sea? Because as Chuck pointed out earlier, historically, Louisiana, and the whole North Central Gulf for that matter, has received, relatively speaking, little federal funding, especially given its natural resources and its contribution to the US economy. To this day, there's not a single NSF long-term ecological research site in Louisiana. It's hard to believe. BOEM, formerly the Minerals Management Service, was the only major funder of coastal and continental shelf university-based research off of Louisiana. Louisiana Sea Grant did what it could to fund estuarine and barrier island and coastal and some continental shelf research. MARFIN, a state federal university funding vehicle through NOAA and National Marine Fisheries Service, also funded some coastal and shelf university research. And that was about it until the tragedy of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Let us all remember that Deepwater Horizon was first and foremost a human tragedy, as Rita pointed out earlier, with 11 fatalities and 17 people injured. And second, it was an environmental tragedy. But like the phoenix rising from the ashes, Water Horizon event brought GoMRI into existence with its over $400 million of much needed research infusion into the Gulf. So let's talk about some of the research success stories resulting from consortia funded through GoMRI. I'll only give very brief highlights from these consortia, which we will be hearing about in more detail later. I have the next slide. The first is the Coastal Wetland Consortium. This is a great group of internationally known wetland scientists based out of LumCon and LSU, led by Drs. Rabelais and Turner. I'm just going to give brief thumbnail sketches of some highlights. Hopefully, Nancy will get into more detail later. The marsh appears to be recovering in most areas, but where oil smothered and killed the marsh vegetation, it greatly accelerated erosion. And that erosion, those erosion losses are forever. Marsh fishes seem to be okay again. Marsh invertebrates seem to have recovered. The next slide again, please. Unfortunately, it will take years, maybe decades, for oil buried in the marshes and in the sediments to be metabolized. CWC documented that oil got access to the deep marsh sediments through crab and other burrows, where it remains today relatively unchanged. If I could have the next slide, please. Second, GoMRI was fortunate to have a team of social scientists from the RAND Corporation and several universities, such as Tulane and LSU, to work on community resilience. This is a consortium on resilient Gulf communities. Our coastal communities have been injured by multiple stresses, from suspended fisheries, drops in seafood prices, multiple hurricanes and floods, and then Deepwater Horizon. Some of their surprising findings include subgroups within the population they sampled, like fishing households, which suggests that when entire communities are impacted, the inability to rely upon otherwise strong social networks makes the likelihood of positive depression screens much higher. For example, 27% higher levels of depression in fishing households versus 18% for oil and gas related households and 18% for tourism households. I would like to thank Melissa Finucane for leading this group. And I have the next slide, please. A third area I would like to highlight involves our more charismatic creatures, our marine mammals, such as sperm whales, beaked whales, and dolphins. We have a great team of cetacean experts at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. They have documented whale species distributions and movements in the Gulf with passive acoustic equipment, drones, and gliders, which have generated over 0.5 petabytes of acoustic data since 2015. Regional abundances of sperm and beaked whales have decreased and have not returned to pre-spill levels. As mentioned earlier by Chuck, dolphin populations in coastal Louisiana, especially those in Barataria Bay, are still experiencing respiratory issues and reproductive issues and have significant birthing mortalities. Scientists in Florida discovered that some of the primary food resources for deepwater whale populations, namely the mesopelagic communities living between 100 and 1,000 meters, were severely impacted by Deepwater Horizon and still have not recovered as of 2019. This group of distinguished whale experts is also known for historic disaster recovery mathematical modeling. I can have the next slide, please. Finally, I would like to highlight another GoMRI consortium, the Consortium for Molecular Engineering of Dispersants, based out of Tulane. Dr. Vijay John led a national team who explored dispersant chemistry. They developed several new and exciting dispersants, inhibitors, that have great potential for alternative uses in the future of oil spill responses. I encourage everyone to visit our GoMRI websites to learn more about GoMRI-sponsored research. In conclusion, in Louisiana, GoMRI has funded 62 postdocs, 158 PhD candidates, 84 master's graduate students, and helped train 223 undergraduate student interns. I think the training of these postdoc and students who will become the future environmentalists and oceanographers and social scientists for the Gulf is one of GoMRI's greatest legacies that we can all be proud of.